Hello and welcome. This is a session that I like to have with clients in my Skool community, and they have graciously agreed to being recorded and appearing for it today. So we are going to go over some hot seat questions and some questions that they have coming up around their health. They might add them into the comments below, or they're allowed to unmute and ask the questions. And this is what we do we do it every 2 weeks in the community, every 2 months, depending on kind of what tier you're in. But we are going to show you what some of the questions are and what we go over because they might apply to you and you might find this helpful. So, do either one of you guys have a question that you want me to start with first, or I am going to go through some of Carrie's questions that were submitted first? It's totally up to you. Okay, so migraines in kids. Okay, let's start with that. I have some interest in talking about migraines in kids. I know she's probably got an excess of iron because her dad feeds her breakfast cereals. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about how we're starting off the day. That's important. So for my kids in particular, because I was just talking to my husband about this the other day, the school provides lunches, and if we wanted to, we could just send our 5-year-old to school and they would feed him lunch, and all we would have to worry about is breakfast. And there's been times, because I really like to sleep in. I love my sleep. There's been days where we're supposed to be getting out the door at 8:30 and it's 8:20 and I've slept through my alarm, and we are able to somehow manage to get out the door and be only a couple minutes late. And there's days where if we wake up way sooner, then it's like pulling everybody's teeth and everybody's moving really slow and nobody actually wants to get out the door. So part of that we found is that if I'm not making like this extravagant breakfast, we seem to move a lot better. And we were talking about how it would be so much easier to just give kids cereal, and how I can totally understand why parents give cereal to kids, because one, you don't have to think about what you're feeding them, and two, it's way more, timely. If I wanted to, I could sleep in a lot longer and just feed them cereal. There's a few issues with that. Number one is we are giving, they're going to be fortified with iron. There's going to be other chemicals that are used in it because for example, if it's a product that comes from wheat is sprayed with glyphosate. That's a huge issue with our overexposure that we have to glyphosate. The different dyes, all of the different things that they put in them. I really think that cereals are more so of like a treat. Like if I'm going to bake with some organic cereal, then it'll be something that we have in the evening after dinner, but it's not going to be a breakfast type of food. So that when your child isn't in your care, that's not something that you have your control over as to what they're being fed for breakfast. So in terms of migraines, why I would say cereals are important, but also kind of where, for example, each child that we have uses up more of our minerals. So we give our minerals to our child. No children are born equal. So I was the oldest in my family. I was born, I would argue, with more minerals than my sister was born with, because my mom wasn't working on replenishing her minerals. It wasn't something that was on her radar then. And with that being the case, depending on where your child falls in the lineage of the number of children that you've had can be impactful. So that to say that, the oldest child likely gets the most amount of copper, and then it gets depleted as to what the next child is going to have as we move on, depending on, how close they're born to each other, what we're exposed to, what stressors we're exposed to while we're pregnant. I had one client who was born 6 weeks early. It was 5 or 6 weeks early. And we were talking about how she was born with a lot more iron than copper, likely because of the issues that she was having. And turns out that the day before she was born and the day before her mom went into labor, her mom had been robbed at a convenience store. So that's really, really stressful, and is obviously going to, be really depleting on her minerals. and again, magnesium. So when I'm talking about iron's movement, one of the things that can be really stressful on it is if we have iron that accumulates inside the cell, so the mitochondria can end up having too much iron in it. And the reason why that's like when we're talking about the impacts that it can have is part of that is ATP is really magnesium ATP. And so if we have too much iron in our body and we don't have enough magnesium, then our body isn't going to be able to make energy properly. And that's where you're going to have like eye twitches. That's where you'll have restless legs come from. That's where you'll have headaches and migraines and things like that. All have a connection back to magnesium. And so if we're looking to improve that and we're wanting to reduce the amount of migraines that we're having, then it does tie back to iron's movement and making sure that we're regulating it. So first things first, I would be considering like the supplements taken while pregnant, how old the child is. You can let me know in the chat if you want for those questions, whether or not they're the oldest, whether or not, they're kind of later on if you've had more children. Those are important things to consider and think about. If I had a child that was having migraines, I would be focusing on doing, and say, for example, there were things that were outside my control, like, what somebody else is feeding them that I don't have any control over. I would be focusing on cod liver oil for sure. She's 7 months now. My 7-month-old, I take cod liver oil and put that in her mouth. I just do a really small amount. I dip my finger in it basically and rub it in her mouth. And my children, so all of them, get cod liver oil. The amount differs from child to child because just like, for example, if I were to say that walking is really beneficial, I wouldn't expect then somebody who hasn't walked at all to then just go out and walk 10K the next day because they're not going to feel very well. And the same thing goes when we're adding in different supplements. So it would be low and slow, and the amount that each child is going to want to have is completely unique to that child because we're not all at the same level of balance or imbalance. Okay, so Rena said she's the oldest. I took a gummy prenatal while pregnant with her, okay, and now she's 5, and I recently had my second 3 months ago. Okay, congratulations. That's super exciting. So, okay, so she would have likely had the most amount of minerals to choose from, which is great. That's a great way to start. And so those are good things. So I would be focusing on the cod liver oil. I think cod liver oil is like one of the best supplements to give kids. And it sounds disgusting. I have a lot of people on social media who'll be like, my kid won't have that, but you'd be surprised. My kids jump up and down when I ask them if they want their cod liver oil for the day. So, they love it. And I would imagine it's because it helps them feel good. So they know that and they like it. Another thing that I do is I grind down beef liver. So you could, if you wanted to, just go to like a local farm and ask them if they would, when they're butchering the cow, if they would, and she hates the oil. Yeah, so what I would do, so I tried doing it in different ways. So with my oldest, because my oldest had never been exposed to it until he was like 3, with him, I tried putting it in a smoothie. I was like, I'll try and hide it. I'm smarter. I'll hide it in his foods from him, and that's how I'll get him to drink it. And I put it in a smoothie, and it was absolutely disgusting. Like, the smoothie was so gross. He didn't want to have it. I didn't want to have it either. It just like prolonged the taste. So what I started doing is I would add the cod liver oil to a little bit of elderberry syrup because they really love elderberry syrup. And there's one in Canada where it has some honey in it, which would be a good option because she's 5. And it has a little bit of honey in it, so it's nice and sweet. And so I would just add some of the cod liver oil to that. And that's how I changed their taste buds. So I did that for a period of time for my oldest. My youngest always loved cod liver oil. Like he could just never get enough of it. But my oldest or my middle child, I can't remember what I said there. My middle child was the one that always loved it. My oldest didn't care for it at first, but now he does. So I think elderberry syrup is an easy way. It's high in vitamin C, which is, something else that's really helpful. But that would be the route that I would go because you can slowly incorporate it in different ways to help them want it. With the beef liver, so if you go to like a local butcher or a farm and you ask them to grind down the beef liver if you don't have a meat grinder, then when I make ground beef and ground pork, I freeze the liver into small ice cubes basically. I have like I have a dog bone silicone tray that I don't use to make dog treats with. It was one of those Amazon purchases where I was like, I'm definitely going to use this and make my dog different treats. And then I've never done that. I use it now to put our beef liver in. And so anyway, they're tiny, and so I freeze them that way, and then I just keep them in the freezer. And then when I go and make ground beef and ground pork, then I just take a few of those and put them in. My goal is to do it so that no one can taste that the beef liver has been added into things so that it slowly changes our taste buds. So to start off with, I added probably like 2 or 3 of these tiny little bones. And I think the last time that I was counting, because now I just eyeball it with how much meat there is versus how much beef liver I'm putting in, I put about 10. So I would say, maybe like a third of it was beef liver and nobody was noticing because our taste buds had changed. So that's another option too. In terms of the magnesium, you can apply magnesium topically to her. So that can be a really great way. I don't know if she still takes baths or not, but adding some Epsom salts to the bath can be really helpful because then she's going to absorb it that way. Mineral Mule, which is a lotion that has magnesium in it. I like rubbing that on my kids' feet at night. There's been times where like when my son's had a headache and then I'll just kind of like rub it around the base of the neck or rub it on his back kind of a thing and just help relax him a little. Even if you got like a magnesium spray, that would be helpful too. But yeah, overall, when we're thinking of like headaches or migraines, then that's oh, you love the mineral meal. Okay, that's great. Yeah, so try that. Try that on her feet. See if that helps, because a little bit will go a long way. And yeah, that one's a really great option to look at for sure. So I hope that gives you some spots to start with. I actually saw a recipe. I don't need any more work to do, but before I leave for the root cause protocol convention next week. But my sister sent this to me, and I was like, I have to make a video on this. And it was somebody they took mandarin oranges, and they peeled them, and then they froze them. And then after they were frozen, they put them in a blender and blended it up, and it was basically like a creamsicle. Well, that's a super easy way to make an adrenal cocktail. So I sometime today I'm going to go buy some oranges and then grab some coconut milk and some cream of tartar and some salt. And that will be a really easy way to make like an ice cream version of the adrenal cocktail that you can give to kids. So I wouldn't start the day off with something like that because when we're thinking of how iron moves, we really want to keep the spleen warm. Like frozen foods are really hard on the spleen. And so I know a lot of people like to start the day off with a smoothie, but we want to start the day off with warm foods. We want to warm the body. It's really helpful if we do that, and especially when you're 3 months postpartum. Your body is still recovering, and so it's really helpful if you're going to have it yourself that we want warm foods. So it would be kind of like I'm going to try and make it like an orange creamsicle kind of a flavor. I'm sure if I had like a little bit of vanilla to it, and then the different components of adrenal cocktail, then that will be a really easy way to get kids to have it. So that's another option for sure. Again, I would say like in terms of the ratios, it's going to depend on how many oranges you're using versus how much you want to add in. I think the best way to go about doing things is adding things in where the kids really don't know. So for example, like if I were to say, it's 3 oranges and then half a teaspoon of salt, if the kiddo tastes the salt and they're like, ugh, this is gross, then it's too much. So just reduce it until you kind of get up to where you want to be with a ratio for it to help it get it into them, because we want to do it in, again, a gentle way. And I really trust the wisdom of children when they're saying like, you know, that's too much, or for example, like with supplements, like if my kids want more cod liver oil, I give it to them. If they want more elderberry syrup, I give it to them. I really trust that they know a lot more about their bodies than what we've kind of been conditioned to believe. So I would listen to that for sure. So I hope that helps. Carrie, I'm gonna go through I really want to get to the matcha one. So if you have other questions that you think are important, then let me know. But I'm super excited for this. So the question is, I recently heard that matcha in particular negatively, go for all of those, okay, uh, negatively affects iron's movement in the body and consumes it sparingly or on special occasions. I'm curious if you have any thoughts on this besides a quick caffeinated drink. I love to have matcha, especially in the springtime, almost daily in the spring, but since I've made some iron strides, I'm like, should I maybe think this through a little more this year? Okay, so first of all, I drink matcha every single day, like multiple times throughout the day. And I think that it's important to kind of like, yeah, I think it's important to like preface it with this. So before I started doing all of this, my ferritin was always what was high, but my hemoglobin was never like something to like, I mean, it wasn't bad, but it wasn't like high either. My ferritin was always between 80 and I would say like 125, which is incredibly high since we don't want it higher than 50. And I'd leave with like my little gold star from the naturopath who was saying like your ferritin stores are great, can't believe that they're this high. Meanwhile, I had a whole bunch of other issues. So when I started doing everything, I couldn't donate blood for, I want to say it was about a year that I'd been like taking all the supplements and changed things up for. And because where I live, there was no blood donation spot. So when I went and donated, the lady just about fell out of her chair and she's like, I've never seen a hemoglobin this high in a woman before. And I said, oh, what is it? And she goes, 170 or 17, depending on what unit of measurement you're using. And so for comparison, for a male, we would want it to be 14 or 140. And for a woman, we want it at 13 or 130. And so 170 is just like astronomically high. I basically had iron just boiling out of me. And every time that I've gone to go donate blood, my iron in my hemoglobin is always much higher than it needs to be. So much so that one time when I donated and I wasn't feeling well, which typically lowers your hemoglobin because your body will release more copper and your hemoglobin can drop when you have a cold. My hemoglobin was still like 148, so 14.8, which is still super high. And again, so I drink matcha every day. I make it myself. So the next adrenal cocktail that I have coming is technically an electrolyte instead of an adrenal cocktail because it doesn't have the whole food vitamin C in it, but it has matcha. So it has matcha, it has lavender, it has vanilla, it has avocado in it so that we're getting our B vitamins. It has like a blend of different ones. So when I drink it, that's the one that I'm drinking. I add it with like some coconut milk, or if I had raw milk, then that would be what I would have, and mix it up and have it that way. Or I drink traditional medicinals if I'm looking for a tea bag, which I have right here, and I have matcha tea in there. So I would say all of the tea that I drink is matcha, but I wanted to kind of bring up a few points around it. So give me 1 second here because I'm just looking for where I think I might have accidentally exited the tab. So give me 1 second and I will pull it up. So there's this book called Dumping Iron, How to Ditch This Secret Killer and Reclaim Your Health by P.D. Magnan. And his book is super interesting. There's a whole bunch of different things that I like to take from it. But where did it go now? Let me add this in because I thought that this was interesting. Okay, I'll pull up the notes here. So when we're thinking of how it impacts iron's movement, there's a few things. So in this book, E.D. Magnan was talking about, wish he had put his first name because I feel silly calling him by his initials. Let me find it here. So there's a difference in the body. First of all, it might make sense if I go through it this way. So there's a difference in the body between iron chelators, so things that are going to help pull out the free iron that we have. And when I'm talking about iron's movement, that's what I'm referring to. Where we want iron to be in our hemoglobin, 70% of our iron in our body is meant to be in the hemoglobin, and that only leaves 30% where it should be in other places. So, the majority is where we want it. We want it to be in our blood. And part of the issue is when we don't have enough copper, we have too much iron, we have exposure to different chemicals and different stressors, then iron becomes free and can build up in our tissues. And that would be why, for example, you wouldn't see it in hemoglobin, why somebody's ferritin might be really low, or they might see it that it's above 50 because it's not being loaded into the cell properly. It can go both ways, where if it's below 20, that can be an issue, and if it's above 50, that can be an issue. They can mean the same thing. It just depends more so on, I would say, not so much like ferritin itself, but how they're interacting, what the numbers look like with other ones, and what the symptoms are. But P.D. Magnan was talking about different chelators and how they're pulling out iron. So there's plant compounds that can help be really beneficial. And for example, I'm sure I'm going to butcher how I'm saying this, but the polypyrenols are EGCG from green tea. And then we also have like curcumin from turmeric. We have quercetin from onions. And so those can be really helpful because they're going to help pull out this free iron. Another one that's helpful is rice bran, or IT6 is another form of it, and that helps pull it out. So something that I think as to why people think that it lowers their iron is I think that it's actually helping remove the free iron, and it's helping regulate it in that sense. Because it wouldn't make sense to me why it would stop the body from absorbing iron. I think that it's because it's a plant form, that it's likely pulling out the free iron. I would imagine that it probably gives priority to heme iron, and that it's helping because it binds up the non-heme iron. So when people say that it stops the absorption, we want the heme iron. That's going to be the ideal iron that we were going to go for anyway, because there's a difference between the two. And I'll have more information on that after I come back from the conference, because there's going to be, there's a researcher there from a university in the United States who's studying heme and non-heme. So I'll be able to explain this a little bit better after then. I'm really excited to listen to him. But I really don't think that matcha stops our ability to absorb iron. I think that it helps us regulate it. I would imagine that it's likely a chelator of it, but I don't have any issue with it at all. I feel like for a lot of the time, I'm glad you're related. I feel like I'm my own guinea pig, and I'll test things out on myself and see how they go. But I've had matcha every single day for years, and I love it. So the next question is, any tips or suggestions to mitigate radiation while at the airport or airplane traveling? Curious if I have any thoughts or tips. So, you could get like a blanket to wear. That would be really good. If I was pregnant and I was going on a plane, that would probably be something that I would think about. Mainly like just to keep over top of the belly to be helpful. But I would also say that just having like an Epsom salt bath after the plane could be really helpful. Like EMF plane blankets, or like if you just Googled like an EMF blocking blanket, then they'll typically come up, which can be really helpful. So that would be an option. I also think that, depending on the flight that you're going on, fasting can be really helpful so that your body's not focused on digesting foods. that is one route that I would go for sure. And yeah, I find fasting while traveling makes a huge, huge difference. So that can be really beneficial as well. Um, I just I had a thought of all of the times that people were wearing all those masks on planes, thinking that that was somehow helpful. Um, but yeah, no, I would say those are probably one of the biggest ones. Give me 1 second now. I'm just going to pause this because I hear my little one that's just woken up. So I'm going to pause the recording and I will be right back. Okay, so um, your question and matcha got me thinking more about coffee. I love the taste and drink it every day, but I don't know how much it's chelating my copper. Yeah, so I would say there's a few kind of like caveats that I have for coffee because a lot of the time I apologize, somebody just pulled into the driveway, so if my dog barks, that's the reason why. But there's a few issues that I have with coffee, and a lot of it has to do with the sourcing and how we're making it rather than the coffee itself. So I really don't have issues when things are whole food form. So if something is naturally occurring, then I really don't have much of an issue with it. I used to not like the way that coffee would make me feel, so I would go to decaf coffee or just really not drink coffee at all. But then when you actually start looking into how they're making the coffee decaf, that's a big issue. Um, so now when I have coffee, I make sure that it's organic coffee, that I have some kind of like awareness over what that company is doing, whether or not it's like a quality company or not. If it's coming from like, say somebody's behind the brand that I really trust, then I really don't even look into my due diligence, which I probably should. But I find that as long as it's coming from like a quality source, another thing is going to be like how we're brewing it. If we're brewing it at like a super hot temperature and we're not, because if we're doing different things to it that aren't ideal, then that's going to be an issue. So I really don't have a problem with coffee in itself. I think that we can overconsume coffee for sure. Like, for example, my husband was saying how he was having all of these eye twitches, but then was having like 3 or 4 large cups of coffee a day because he works night shift. And he had said that he needed to cut back on it. And I'm glad that he made that connection because I definitely think that we can absolutely overconsume it for sure. So just like anything, it can be too much of a good thing. So I don't have coffee is like not one of the hills that I like to go to with clients. I'll typically leave it alone unless we're getting it from like a source that's not super great. Like I wouldn't recommend Starbucks. I don't think that they're having like really great coffee. There a lot of the time it's like really roasted and so it's burnt. And things like that. But yeah, if you're having like 1 cup of coffee a day and it's coming from a good source, then that's not something that I have like a huge concern about. Yeah. So I hope that makes sense. Okay. Give me 1 second here. Okay, I ordered the Jigsaw Adrenal Cocktail on iHerb and it's still en route. For the time being, salt mineralization with Celtic salt, a specific other kind of salt that I highly suggest. So salt is, I mean, like, I think all of these things are super interesting, but the fact that salt comes in all kinds of different colors, I think is like amazing because a lot of us think of like pink Himalayan salt or just Celtic salt. Well, there's all kinds of different colors. Personally, I really like Celtic salt. I think that it's important. Again, a lot of people will get really hung up on heavy metals and be really worried about like the heavy metal amount that comes in salt. But I don't for 2 reasons. One, if it's naturally occurring, then that's meant to be there. So Lily Nichols, she studies a lot of like her focus for her practice, I would say, is pregnant women, fertility and postpartum. And when she was talking, there's a blog post, I think it's a blog post that she has, and it's talking about how it's a blog post, or she was talking about it on a podcast, I can't remember. But it was talking about how when we have fish that's high in mercury, that it's really not an issue because there's other minerals and there's other nutrients that are in it that help balance out that mercury, where our bodies actually know what to do with it. So it's not like we're just taking this bolus of mercury, we're getting other nutrients with it, and so it kind of mitigates it. And I really think of kind of like the heavy metals that can come from salts as the same thing. As long as it's naturally occurring and we're not like altering something in some way, then I don't have an issue with the levels that things are at because our bodies have evolved with that. They know what to do. Interestingly enough, us and whales are the only mammals that go through menopause. So to me, that would mean that there's some kind of connection that we have to the water. And salt was used to preserve our foods for eons. And once the invention of the refrigerator came around, once the invention of the refrigerator came around, then our salt consumption has dropped by 2/3. So I really do think that we have like a connection to the water. How that looks, I don't know, but I would say like Celtic, that's the one that I would go to. But there's all different kinds that you can get that are pretty cool. And I think you can even get like purple salts and things like that. But for ease, like affordability, I would say Celtic is a great one to go with. And then so for an adrenal cocktail, you're going to want sodium, you're going to want the potassium. So potassium can come from cream of tartar, it can come from coconut water, it can come from, those are, I would say, like the two best routes to go to get them. And if you're getting those in, don't you dare. If you're getting those two, then those are the routes to go. You can add in, so acerola cherry is one of the highest, it's the second highest form of whole food vitamin C. There's another one that's a plum, and it comes from Australia. That's the highest form of whole food vitamin C, so adding something like that can be really helpful. But those are, camu is another one that's really rich in vitamin C. So those are some different ways that you can go if you're going to make your own adrenal cocktail and add those in. That's right, take it in the morning. So adrenal cocktails are ideal between 10 and 2. They help your body produce melatonin. So when I originally started saying that, I didn't have any, because I would take my adrenal cocktail at like all hours of the day. I didn't have a specific time that I would take it. But then I started having clients telling me like, hey, this actually kept me awake all night long. And so I think that it's similar to like how if we were to be exposing our eyes to the morning sunlight, then that helps our body, like our circadian rhythm, helps set us up for the end of the day. I think the adrenal cocktail works similar in that sense, where it's not necessarily like going to make you tired in that moment, but it helps work with your circadian rhythm. So I would say ideally between 10 and 2, no later than 2, because some people can be wired from it. I don't think, I have yet to have somebody tell me this, but I haven't had somebody come back and tell me that the adrenal cocktail that I made had the same effect. So for example, my husband was one of the people who would be wired if he had it too late in the day, where he's just like not able to sleep at all and would cause a big issue. And that was if he was having like the jigsaw one, but if it was the salty fashion, the one that I formulated, then that's not an issue and he can have it at like any hour of the day and be fine. I'm not sure if that's because there's B vitamins in it. I'm not sure what exactly the reason is, but it doesn't seem to have that same effect. So it's just something to keep in mind. Ideally, if you're going to be making it yourself, I'd be having it no later than 2 p.m. just to make sure that you're able to sleep at night. Because if not, then you're going to message me and tell me that you've never been awake so much and so wired late at night. Okay, I'm going to have a quick sip of water here. Little Miss is just on the ground here, so if you hear any sounds, then that's her, not me. Um, okay, I am still having mega sugar cravings. In my iHerb order, I also ordered the right cream of tartar and dark chocolate to melt. Okay, perfect for covering strawberries with. I was considering using dates. I think that's a great idea. And covering those with melted chocolate and cream of tartar once they arrive. Currently still having spoonfuls of maple syrup and at least 1 or 2 spoonfuls of honey a day. And the other day, I completely caved and ate an entire large, milky dark, not really dark, dark pretzel bar from the local mart. I'm wondering if I need to kind of toggle over and try fasting a bit more. Happy to hear fasting thoughts. Okay. And Carrie just said, where did it go now? Bad chocolate in mass quantity. Okay. I mean, that's okay. I can't remember if I told you, but when I had given birth to my, let me just grab the little one here at the ball. When I had given birth to my second, so he was born in April, mini eggs were on clearance, and I had just had him like maybe 5 days to a week before, and like my husband was at work and he had said that somebody from work said mini eggs were on sale. And I think you guys are both in the States, so you might not know what mini eggs are, but they're like these tiny eggs that have like this hard shell on them that are filled with chocolate on the inside and they're multicolored on the outside, and they're delicious. Um, my favorite, like if I were to like binge out on anything, it's like the mini eggs. And I'm pretty sure actually I saw a photo of like when I first started my social media pages. Um, I'm pretty sure I put like 80% healthy foods and like 20% mini eggs because like that's my thing. And I even had to talk with a friend about it. She was like, "What is your thing with mini eggs?" I was like, "It's not even like the taste, it's like the sound of like the clanging. Like I definitely have have a problem. Like they got me on all aspects of like the taste and the sound and like the texture. It just like makes the trifecta." Anyways, they were $5 and normally they're like $25 a bag, but they were on clearance. So I go in there with my newborn baby and I'm like filling up my arms with it. And there's this old man and old woman that are watching me. And instead of just being like, hi, I asked them if they would help me carry out bags of mini eggs. So I left there with like 5 or 6 bags of these mini eggs. And yeah, I was super proud of myself. I thought that was great because when I was pregnant, I was like super scared about what to eat because the pregnancy before I had had gestational diabetes, so I was really nervous about consuming anything that would spike my blood sugar. And then that just created this habit where afterwards it was basically like a free for all, and I was like letting loose with all this pent up like things that I thought that I couldn't have for that whole time, rather than just doing things in moderation and being okay with it that way. So I would say, first of all, if you're feeling like things are getting out of control, I think as long as it's something that is like, if you can find a good option where it's dark chocolate, and like you said, like the strawberries and what have you, I think that's totally fine. When I had gone to the when I had gone to see the naturopath and I was like, I definitely think I have a problem with mini eggs right now. She's like, well, it's not cocaine, so like you're doing okay. And I was like, I mean, I guess like if that's gonna be like what the goalposts are, then I guess yeah. But like I'm eating like a bag of mini eggs. Like I would say like I was going through them like a week at a time, and they're big bags. So anyway, I totally get it. I think part of it though is like whether or not we feel like it's something that we should be having or we shouldn't be, and like that should is the big component of it. So if it feels like it's something that's bad, then that's part of what's making us, I would say, like crave it more. So I would say like a big part of that is if you want to have it, then have it. Like you're choosing really great options. You're having maple syrup. Like, you're basically like pulling a Buddy the elf, getting like the best form of syrup that you can, yeah, elf mode is activated, that you can get. Hang on one second here. Okay, I'm multitasking. So I would say that if you're choosing something that even like if it's satisfying that craving that you have, then I would say go with it. But I definitely like fasting a lot. Actually, going back, I really think you need to read this book because a lot of the questions that you had, I was like coming into here to get the answers for. Okay, so um, where was he talking about it? So one of the hallmarks of aging is the accumulation of cellular junk, which causes damage and poor function. When young, our cells use a regulated process, autophagy, to clear away old and damaged structures and molecules. As we age, this process declines, so older people have much lower levels of this process. Fasting, a certain substance, um, and certain substances strongly increase autophagy. So he was talking about like exercise and how that can stop, like the belief anyway is that it stops the absorption of the iron, and how when we fast it's causing like those old damaged cells to get eaten away, and so it helps recover the body better. So I would say if you're going to fast, do it with like the traditional Chinese medicine clock as to when the organs function best in the body. I used to think that I would feel better in the like I used to really enjoy avoiding breakfast. I would start eating, I would say, like, and give myself like a 6 to 8 hour window. And so I used to enjoy eating later in the day rather than earlier. And I really think that's really hard on the body. And even after having tried it out a few times, I think I probably got away with it because I was younger. And now I think that if we start our day off eating breakfast, so if we have our first meal around like 7, get some food in us, and say if you eat for 6 hours throughout the day and then you fast for the rest, that would be my preference. Because in the later part of the day, like as soon as we kind of get to like the 5, 7 o'clock range, there's different organs that are trying to recover around then. Rather than if we start eating at 7, that's when the organs are like energized, they're ready to go, that's when they're at their peak. And so they're able to, like the digestive system is more functional and it's less strenuous to add food in. And so versus when they're looking to recover and have some time to rest. Okay. Damn it. What are you doing? No? Do I involve? Do I involve? So I love fasting. I'm a big fan of it. I do it myself. Even when I'm breastfeeding, I think that it's really beneficial because it's totally possible to get our nutrient requirement. I mean, it's called break fast, like breakfast is breaking a fast. So this thought that like we have to consume food through like all hours of the day just because we have access to it, I think is part of the problem. And when we limit the hours to which we eat, I think can be really helpful. So if it feels right for you, then I think that that could be beneficial, and working on that. So maybe if you're like, around, I mean, we typically, it would be an adrenal thing, but if you're having like a kind of a lull around like the 1 to 2 p.m. mark and you're feeling a little bit fatigued, then I love breakfast. Yeah, exactly. So that's a great way to start the day off, and that just aligns with the rhythm of the body. So um, I would say like ideally if you can go between 12 and 18 hours in a fast is is helpful. And yeah, I think Arena said, I don't think it's possible for me while breastfeeding. I get hungry 30 minutes after a good whole food meal. Yeah, I think it depends like where we are in it. So there's different parts of that too. I found that this postpartum, where I would be like super hungry with my other children. For this postpartum, I found like I was more balanced. And the only time that I didn't feel like I was like satisfied or I would start having those hunger cravings is when I had left the house and we were kind of like out of our element and I was having foods that I typically wouldn't eat or hang on one second. I was having foods that I typically wouldn't eat, or like, if we're staying at family's house or something like that, and like I'm not making the meals, and so there's a lot more carbs. I found that to be like a huge issue for me. If there's a bunch of carbs on my plate, then that's not going to go over very well. So that can be one way too to help with those because aside from that, like aside from us traveling and being kind of out of our element, I didn't have any of those like super hungry where I was like, I'm breastfeeding and I need food yesterday kind of things that I used to get with the other ones. So I really haven't had much of an issue with the fasting, and I find that I feel a lot better with it. Now it's not like a dry fast. Obviously, I'm drinking like lots of water, lots of adrenal cocktails for sure, to help keep like the minerals up. But that would be the route that I would look at. What are you doing? Hang on a second here. I'm gonna go put somebody in the in the. Okay, so do you guys have any questions around any of that? We probably have time for like one more question. So if you guys do have one, then let me know and I'll answer that one. On the fruit and meat thing. Oh, the next question. Okay. Hormonal water retention, especially with the legs and thighs and belly and face also at times. Any thoughts on why this happens and how to correct it? I saw a lady on Instagram do a reel on this topic and she suggested a fruit and meat diet with green tea and minimal water for a few days a month. Okay. I found it. There you go. So green tea, interestingly, helps pull out the free iron. So that one is, that's part of why that one's helpful. Think of it for a second like if you take a steak, if you're going to cook a steak and you sprinkle salt on it, the salt helps pull the water out of the water, or the water out of the meat, and we're going to be the same. So if our fluid isn't moving properly, and this is why I harp on adrenal cocktails, and it's kind of funny because I keep having people message at me and be like, I'm taking whole food vitamin C, like you said. And I was like, I'm not talking just about whole food vitamin C, I'm talking about adrenal cocktails. But I know that it's coming from my ebook where I was talking about whole food vitamin C and like the importance that it has, but I didn't talk about all of the different components of an adrenal cocktail, and I definitely figured out that that's where the miscommunication is coming from, so I need to change that. But the adrenal cocktails help with the fluid movement. So like if somebody's having cold hands and cold feet, or their extremities are getting cold, or even if like when they're standing up, they're starting to feel lightheaded, a lot of those symptoms, we think of them as low iron, but they can actually have to do with potassium and sodium. So on the outside of the cell, we have sodium, and then on the inside of the cell, we have potassium and magnesium. And the potassium and magnesium need to be together in order to lock the water in the cells for us to feel more hydrated. Something that I find really common is that when people need more potassium, then she agrees with me, then they can start to swell a lot more easier if they start adding in sodium. So you might find that your need for like cream of tartar or coconut water is actually a lot higher than what other people might be. And that's just something that you're going to have to play around with to see kind of where that lines up to help with the fluid retention. I mean, give me one second. Okay, so with the suggestion to have fruit and meat, I mean, that sounds like you would be putting your body like it sounds to me like she's suggesting going into ketosis. and drinking green tea. I think keto can be helpful. I used to really like it because the clients that I had that were doing it would have like super great results right away. My only hesitation is I don't think that it's great when somebody has a gallbladder that's struggling, doesn't have a gallbladder, or their digestion isn't optimal. Um, so when we go into keto, or when we do any kind of like diet that's like an all or nothing kind of a thing, like more, I would say more extreme rather than like a balance from different foods and different types, then it's really depleting on our magnesium. So, for example, I had a previous client who would go like binge drink on weekends. It would, and so alcohol really hard on B3, really depleting on magnesium. And then during the week would eat keto, and then on the weekend would just like let loose and have whatever she wanted. And the issue with that is then we're gonna have a buildup from the body where it's trying to get back to balance. So you might see like gallstones, you might see different stones in different places pop up, a whole bunch of different things because the body is it's under like a significant amount of stress when we're doing things that way. And so that's just one example, but I do think that keto can be helpful, just like I think, if somebody say was like, this sounds crazy, but I do think like, when people see benefits of going vegan for maybe like a week or so can be helpful because you're, limiting the amount of different things that you're eating. It's less like synthetic foods. It's actually real whole foods that you're eating. I think there's benefits that come along with that, but I do think that it can be like a little bit hard on the body. So I would say that an adrenal cocktail would be where I would lean into because you can have a lot of benefits in terms of like swelling with that. I would focus like on movement. If like, moving your body and exercise is a possibility, then I highly recommend that. And then I would say trying the adrenal cocktail and playing around with like the amount of cream of tartar and the amount of salt. So for example, if I were to make an adrenal cocktail, I might say to somebody, start off with like 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt and 1/8 of a teaspoon of water or of cream of tartar, and try those out and see how they feel. For you, I would say probably like start with 1/8 of a teaspoon of cream of tartar and then maybe like a pinch of salt and see how that feels. If that feels like that's starting to regulate things a little bit more, then that's a good thing, and I would keep up with that. But I would try that first because all that it means is that water is not staying into the cell, it's coming out of the cell, and that's where we're getting some of that swelling from. So we just want to correct that. Yeah, awesome. Okay. Well, thank you, ladies, so much for coming. I have someone who's telling me it's time to go, but I totally appreciate you guys coming. I appreciate all your questions, so thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you inside the community. If you have any questions or anything like that, you can post them to the board, and I'll do my best to get back to you. Okay, see you later.